Thank you very much. Great to be here. I'll be talking about things that to some of you are super interesting, but some of you are probably not that interested in. And my sales manager here in Finland said, Eric, remember that these are HR directors. They don't care that much about systems. Well, hopefully throughout these minutes, I'll try to change and convince you otherwise, because I think there are a couple of good messages that a lot of you guys could. But first of all, I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about myself and why I ended up in HR. I'm actually not an HR guy. Until I joined Aditro, I'd never really worked within HR in any respect, other than being an employee and a manager. I started off as a management consultant for 10 years with Accenture. I did implement systems for Ericsson and Scandinavian Airlines and Telia and a few others. But around 1999, long time ago, something called the internet came around. And those of you who were around then know that something called broadband and a few other things came in. And suddenly, this was an area that everybody realized that this would really impact our society. And I started working on engagements around internet. And ever since then, I've been working solely with products or services or offerings that are related to internet. At that time, we didn't talk about digital. We didn't talk about anything of that. And those of you who were there remember that there were completely other things. But people realized that a lot of things were going to happen. There had been IT around for a long time, but no one really understood the impact that IT would have on everything we do in society. And I think that you guys working in HR have started to realize that. Maybe some of you a little bit later, and some of you earlier. Today we talk about AI, and we've heard about those things. So I started off working in industries like gaming and gambling, online video, which were all interesting things that happened and brought where internet was sort of the only thing around them. I mean, we couldn't run these things without internet. 3 years ago, I was contacted by the chairman of Aditro, and he said, Eric, I think it's time for you to come to us now. And I was like, I don't know anything about HR. Well, what has happened now recently in HR is that it's not just about the systems that are up on the payroll department. We are looking at the employee as a consumer. We are now starting to leveraging the technologies that has been around for a long time. And we want to take that one step further. And that's when we started talking about digital HR, and that's been around for a while. And I was hired to work with Aditro and around almost 1,000 customers in the Nordics to help our customers bring them into the future, but moving them from where they used to be into something new. And I wanted to talk to you about some of the problems that I've encountered during these first 3 years, and a little bit perspective on that. And maybe some of you, I can give you a little bit of advice what to think about when you embark on your journeys for this. So our strategy after a while was quite clear that we wanted to focus on a couple of things. And what we came out with was that there were 2 key enablers that we wanted to focus on that we thought could really make a big difference. And we decided that cloud and mobile is going to be the core of our strategy. So by moving from old solutions to cloud solutions, we enable to get access to all the technology quickly in a completely new way. And the second thing I think is probably the most important thing. If we want our employees and managers to really embrace new technology and use them and be part of our work life, we need to move out to the mobile. And in order to do that, we need to be in the cloud. And by doing that, we speed up and streamline the world of HR. And that's what we're going to talk about. So, but of course, some of you have been, or maybe hands up, how many of you have, within the last 3 years, implemented new HR systems? Raise your hand. How many think that you will, the next 3 years, significantly work in updating your infrastructure in HR? Okay, so I think we can all agree that this is going to be a topic for many of you. So you're likely to run in some of these questions. And let me, this is sort of a wrap-up. Of course, I'm a provider of systems and so on. I'm not going to talk about the systems as such, but I think this is quite general for all these guys, both my partners and my competitors here. So we'll talk about that. But these are the things that I would start with. So we heard about later on, just previously, about the why, meaning and purpose. And that is for your employees. But I would also say that one of the first questions before we even start the project is, why are we doing this? It might be a simple question, because everybody knows, we're modernizing IT. Yeah, but why are you really doing it? Because the first thing is, and this is my experience from this, okay, poor HR people, you're always number 8 in group management. It's always someone from sales before you. There's always someone from marketing and the CFO at the top, and the HR people are always like. So once you get the money to invest in HR, it's all about this, because it's typically the CFO who asks you all the questions, how much are we going to make on this, and what's our ROI on these investments, why are you doing that? And that's quite easy. So this is the easy question. Because when you invest in this, and you can go around to all the providers of IT here, we have beautiful business cases around this, where we can talk about reduced times, less administration, less time. I mean, there are just tons of things that we could show you. So yes, it will be easy for you to build a business case on this. And that's important, have that, because that will keep your CFO and your CEO really happy. But I think that you, at this point, should really think about the second thing. And the return on experience is, I would say, a far more important goal of your modernization of HR than the ROI. Because the return on experience is really what it's all about, all the other topics we talk about this morning. We're talking about how we, things like talent acquisition, things like meaning before. All of those things are about, if you want to be a modern company, and if you want to have an employee proposition, you need to make sure that all of these processes that you enable through these IT systems are something that they can embrace and something that they can use and they can understand. You don't want dull things that no one understands, but maybe the people in the HR department. So you want to put that experience of interacting with you. And this has nothing to do with the system. I guess you all guys are talking about your role in HR in the future. How are we going to be not police, but rather helping? How are we going to be not the very strict policy makers, but rather the person who treats our employees as adults and not just being parents? So I think that is really important, and that's why you should make sure that whenever you choose your systems or your solutions, think about it from the employee perspective, not just the HR specialist or the payroll specialists, but them and the managers, of course. So that's how we typically summarize it. And I think the first top lift was the reason the chairman called me. Eric, we've been building these systems for experts forever. There's one user in the HR department or a couple of users in payroll, but really they're complicated, they're all about the desktop, and they're all about customization. And that's really not what we want to keep in the future. We want to do something completely different now. And that's why we put up this instead. What do we want them to be? Well, we want them to be for everyone. We want them to work really, really well for the HR specialists, and for the one who are always in the meetings, who are always in the systems every day. But for those poor guys who are new hired, in Sweden, we have a big challenge with a lot of immigrants who maybe come with poor skills, language skills, new to their job. And those of you who have teenagers, they live in their mobile and they understand that. But some of the processes we have coming to work are really not that easy to understand if you're new, if you're young, and even if you're foreign. So any device, standardize it and make it come out. So this is what, but then of course the project starts. And so what are the common pitfalls? And of course, here's some basic stuff, which I think maybe are a little bit, but I think I need to start with the first one, because this is the first workshop I have with customers when we start talking about the processes. So, okay, you all have your own processes. and that's fantastic, and that's great. You'll be working on them, and you have sort of sketched them out. And of course, you want the software provider to sort of help you get these in place. First advice here, don't work against the system. Okay. So of course you want the system to do what you, and we don't want to be run by the system. Okay, but the system has some sort of logic in it. And if you try to do a process that's completely the other way around, you're just fighting a battle that you will lose. So you need to talk to your provider and listen to them when they suggest you to run it in a certain way. And listen carefully. They're not doing this because they're lazy and just want to get it done. They're doing it because they know that the system is built in such a way that it doesn't need that to be exactly, but you need to remember that. The other thing is roles. So you have a lot of people over time, the organization has been in a certain way, and people have done stuff. And Lena is responsible for that, and he's doing that, and his works like this. Okay, try to get down to the basics. You know, you have employees, you have managers, you have specialists. You know, try to use that, because a system gets super complicated when there's a lot of people doing things, and he can't see that person's with that, and he can't do that, and that person needs to look at that department, and so on. Try to harmonize that. Try to look it. Try to sort of get that, because that will put you in a lot of trouble. Customizations. Of course, all our systems here today can be customized. So you can add things. You can have special data. You can do things. Yeah, of course, we can tweak them. But if you need to program or code or build something and bring in people from other IT vendors to build things in between and bridges, that looks fantastic in the beginning, but that person will leave the company and no one will figure out what was in there, and that will just create problems for you. Try to avoid them. Okay, the basics, of course. So Aditro, of course, we sell payroll and HR. So and Virpi and my team said, Eric, you know, this is your perspective on this. But I must say that I have now met a lot of companies who start at the wrong end. So these are the boring things. We've been talking about cool things today before, like engagement or, you know, surveys and culture, and, you know, we have apps for this, and there's tons of technology in HR. And that's great, and I embrace that, and I love technology. I'm a technology guy in all aspects. But guys, a couple of basic things first. The first one is data. You heard about data. You need to get your employee data and master data in good shape. If you don't, you're screwed anyway. So that's what you need to start with. And that's a little bit boring for HR people because, what data, what's that? But I think you can figure out what it is. Then, look at yourself and what you do on your everyday job. You are doing things around payroll and employment processes, I can assure you. Because when payroll, we have this thing saying no bad day. And that is, our goal is for you guys not to have any bad days. And one of the bad days you have is when payroll is wrong and people get too much salary, too few salary, and the paychecks are wrong. We don't want that to happen. Typically the problem is pre-payroll, you know, everything that happens, time management and all of those things. It's super important to get in place. And then of course you need all your employment processes. How you hire people, what happens when you get them on board, get the right things done. That is super. After you've done that, you can start with the rest. And that's fine, and I think you should. But you should look at this not as a project, and then you have an HR system and that's it. But what you do instead is making sure that you get those in place, and then you move on. Because all of our systems are really so that you start with something, and then you can evolve and make it bigger and make it longer and progress. And this is, I know that this might be a little bit, how should I say, provocative, but I have a couple of things in Finland which I can compare with Norway and Sweden. And so I'm leaving this on the table for you today, because I've been listening this morning to a lot of really good talks about, and I really liked the previous one about meaning and how you empower. There's also a couple of other themes that maybe not today, but it talks about treating your employees as adults, humans and consumers by Lucy Adams. And I think one of the things that I understand there is that In Finland, and okay, a little bit prejudiced here and so on, but there is something, and I especially see that when I implement software, it's about control and about the meaning of management. In Finland, we always need to implement a lot of checks and approvals and everything. So the processes tend to get a little bit complicated and a little bit divided because it needs to go back and forth between different persons. And if I would leave something on the table for you guys to design processes in Finland, is to ask yourself a little bit about your rules and your policies. Where do they come from? Are they necessary? And are they in line with our people's strategy? Because if you look at this map and all of these things, these are somewhat complicated processes. And if you could take out some complexity out of those and have that, we can have a manager start an employment process rather than HR. We don't have to fill in that form because there are still a lot of forms, still a lot of approvals, still a lot of things that will be sent. So they look like you have a modern HR system, but in reality, you haven't really digitized your processes. They are still chopped up and manual. So, message to you would be that. Try to simplify it, try to standardize it, try to avoid it. Start with those 4 basics. And I know it's a little bit boring because it should only work, but I assure you that's what a lot of your business case, and that's also where a lot of experience for your employees will be. Okay, last one is easy one for the HR people. Find the right crew. Of course, find the right crew. You're HR people. You find always the right people. You know that the people are the most important. But I must say that one of the pitfalls of HR project is that they are treated just as something at row 8 in importance in the company. Because there are a lot other things. The financial system is more important, or the web page is more important, or I don't know what it is. But this is super important. And in order for you to succeed, you need to get the right people on board. And you need to promote yourself from number 8 up to at least top 3, I would say. I think minimum top 3. And the way you do that is by having a number of different people. And of course, this is true to any project that we do in a company. And the sponsors are super important. I think the CFO is going to be super happy if you deliver some of those ROIs. The influencers, the people around in the organization, the ambassadors, but foremost, looking at the business experts. So try to figure out where the pain points are. So you are HR people, you have pain points. But you should go out and find the sponsors in the organization that have pain points. It might be the managers, there might be someone who has a lot of employees. Do a little bit of management consulting with those guys. Work with them for a day. Sit next to them and see what they do. In Sweden, we have a problem. I don't know if it's the same thing as in Finland, but we actually have a big problem getting young people to become managers. And why is that? When you ask them, well, typically when they become managers, we ask them to do the same job they did before and all the admin on top of that. So put yourself in those shoes. And what are the pain points? Get those guys to really prioritize what you should be doing in your systems in order to reduce their workload. But then I'm going to put another little final challenge to you. And I didn't find a good word for it, so I don't know how to phrase it. I named it Digital HR Champion. Maybe it's a little bit cliche a word. But this is sort of my final thing to put for you guys on the table. Because, okay, we're bringing in a cloud mobile system. It's new technology. It's something that you buy as a subscription. It's very, it updates every week, every month. It's totally new way of working. You, in the payroll departments and in the HR department, need to embrace this new technology. And some of you might have a little bit different background. You might come from psychology or from human. You're maybe not really that into IT. And you don't have to be IT person. You don't need to know coding or, web, something like that. But you need to understand that technology can be used in a really useful and effective way. And you need to embrace that. And you need to find those people. Typically, maybe a little bit younger persons who, they live in Facebook and Instagram. They're not afraid of it. Take those, promote those people, put them into your project and have them as owners because they will really be useful in the future. That's all. Good luck with your projects.